On a rain-drenched highway, with lightning splitting the night sky, a decision was made that would unravel a government conspiracy and change the course of American history. Mike Bennett was just an ordinary long-haul trucker, his weathered hands gripping the wheel as he navigated through the worst storm in decades. He wasn't looking for trouble, just trying to make his delivery on time. But fate had other plans when he spotted a desperate figure on the roadside. The soaked teenager he reluctantly welcomed into his cab was carrying something powerful enough to bring military jets circling over American soil, tactical teams surrounding a civilian home, and shadowy government agents willing to break every law to find her. What began as an act of simple kindness would soon force a middle-aged trucker to make an impossible choice: surrender an innocent girl to nameless agents, or stand against the full might of a secret program that had already killed to protect its secrets. The truth was hidden on a single flash drive. The countdown had begun. And for Mike Bennett, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one he was about to face. Before we jump back in, tell us where you are tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you are subscribed, because tomorrow I have saved something extra special for you. The thunderstorm unleashed its fury across the empty highway, transforming the night into a chaotic battlefield of wind and water. Lightning slashed across the sky, illuminating the endless stretch of asphalt that disappeared into darkness seconds later. Through this tempest, Mike Bennett's 18-wheeler pushed forward, its headlights cutting two feeble paths through the deluge. At 53, Mike had seen his share of storms. 27 years behind the wheel had taught him to respect nature's rage, but never to fear it. Tonight was different. The rain hammered his windshield with such violence that even his wipers at full speed could barely keep up. His knuckles had turned white from gripping the steering wheel, shoulders tense as he leaned forward, straining to see beyond the wall of water. "Just 3 more hours to the depot," he muttered to himself, the words lost in the rumble of thunder that shook his cab. The radio had long since dissolved into static, leaving only the rhythmic thud of rain and the steady hum of his engine for company. A sudden flash of lightning transformed the landscape, and that's when Mike saw her. A small figure hunched at the roadside, arm extended in the universal plea for a ride. In that brief moment of illumination, he caught a glimpse of a young face, drenched hair plastered against pale skin, and eyes wide with desperation. "Damn it," Mike whispered, his foot instinctively easing off the accelerator. Common sense screamed at him to keep driving. He'd heard too many horror stories about highway robberies, about truckers who stopped for strangers and never reached their destination. The company had strict policies against picking up hitchhikers. His wife, Carol, would be furious if she knew he was even considering it. Yet something about that brief glimpse, the way the girl's shoulders had curved inward, how small she looked against the vastness of the storm, tugged at him. Another flash revealed her still standing there, shivering violently, clutching a small backpack to her chest like it contained her entire world. Mike's hand hovered over the CB radio. He could call Highway Patrol, let them know there was a kid out in this mess. But by the time they arrived in this weather, his mind flashed to his own daughter, now grown with children of her own. What if it had been her, alone on a night like this? "I'm getting too old for this," he grumbled, activating his turn signal, though there wasn't another vehicle for miles. The massive truck slowed, tires hissing against the wet pavement, as Mike carefully guided it onto the shoulder. Through his side mirror, he watched the girl hesitate, then begin moving toward his truck, each step uncertain. She couldn't be more than 16, soaked to the bone, her thin jacket offering no protection against the elements. As Mike reached across to unlock the passenger door, he caught his own reflection in the rearview mirror. The creases around his eyes deeper than he remembered, the grey in his beard more prominent than ever. Carol always said his heart was too big for his. "Oh, good," Maybe she was right. The door swung open, bringing with it a gust of wind and rain. The girl stood there, water streaming down her face, clutching her backpack like a shield. "You trying to drown out here?" Mike called over the storm's roar. "Get in before we both get soaked." Little did Mike know that this moment of compassion would set in motion events that would change both their lives forever. As the girl climbed into his cab, bringing with her the scent of rain and fear, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one they were about to face together. Hi everyone, welcome to Unfolding Tales. Today I'm continuing our story. The cab of Mike's truck became a sanctuary against the fury outside, raindrops drumming a relentless rhythm on the metal roof. The wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour, scraping back and forth with hypnotic regularity. Mike adjusted the heater, sending a rush of warm air through the space. "There's a towel behind the seat if you need it," he offered, keeping his eyes fixed on the treacherous road ahead. The girl reached back with trembling hands, pulling out the faded blue towel Mike kept for long hauls. She dabbed at her face, then wrapped it around her shoulders like a shawl. Water dripped from her hair onto the worn leather seat, forming small pools that reflected the dim dashboard lights. "I'm Mike," he said after a moment. "Mike Bennett." She studied him with cautious eyes, weighing something in her mind before responding. "Emily," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm. "I'm 17. The words seemed carefully chosen, as if even this small offering of information might be dangerous. Mike nodded, not pushing for more. 27 years on the road had taught him to read people, and everything about this girl screamed caution. Her knuckles were white around her backpack straps, and though she'd stopped shivering from the cold, a different kind of trembling had taken its place. "Where? You headed, Emily?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Anywhere but here," she replied, turning to stare out the passenger window at the darkness beyond. The radio crackled between them, the local station fading in and out. "Severe weather warning remains in effect for the following counties." Static interrupted the broadcast, an unusual interference that made the announcer's voice warp and distort. Mike reached to adjust the dial, but the static only intensified, filling the cab with harsh white noise. Emily flinched, her hand darting to the volume knob and twisting it off. The abruptness of her movement startled Mike more than the static. Sorry," she murmured, withdrawing her hand quickly. "The noise, it bothers me." Mike nodded, though he couldn't help noticing how her eyes darted to the side mirrors, scanning the darkness behind them. "Storm's probably interfering with the signal," he offered. The silence that followed hung between them like a physical presence. Mike had spent countless hours alone in this cab, comfortable with his own thoughts, but this silence felt different, charged with unspoken fears. Emily sat rigid, her back never touching the seat, as if ready to bolt at any moment. Lightning illuminated the road ahead, revealing sheets of rain so thick they resembled a waterfall. Through the driver's side window, Mike glimpsed a road sign, Riverview 47 miles. The small town wasn't his planned stop, but in this weather, continuing much further would be foolish. "There's a truck stop in Riverview," he said, breaking the silence. "Decent diner attached to it. We could grab something hot to eat, wait out the worst of this storm." Emily's eyes met his for the first time since entering the truck, deep blue and filled with a wariness that seemed too heavy for her. "Years. Are there usually a lot of people there?" she asked. "Not on a night like this," Mike replied, wondering what kind of trouble followed this girl, what she was running from. He'd seen kids on the road before, runaways, hitchhikers, but something about Emily's quiet intensity set her apart. The truck pushed forward through the tempest, wipers struggling against the deluge, tires hissing on the wet asphalt. Mike's hands remained steady on the wheel, but his mind raced with questions he knew better than to ask. Whatever Emily was fleeing, it had left her more afraid of what lay behind than the storm ahead. Neither of them noticed the headlights that, appeared in the distance, holding steady behind them despite the treacherous conditions. Lights that should have been obscured by the violent downpour, yet somehow remained perfectly visible through it all. Hi everyone, welcome to Unfolding Tales. Today I'm continuing our story. The storm began to subside as Mike's 18-wheeler approached the outskirts of Riverview, the rain softening from violent sheets to a steady drizzle. Neon lights from the highway businesses pierced the darkness ahead, their reflections dancing on the wet pavement like liquid fire. Emily had barely spoken during the past hour, her eyes fixed on the road ahead or scanning the side mirrors. When a distant siren wailed, probably an ambulance or police car somewhere in town, she visibly flinched, her entire body tensing as if bracing for impact. "You okay?" Mike asked, pretending not to notice how her hands clutched her backpack tighter. "Fine," she replied too quickly, her gaze darting to the side window. "Just don't like loud noises." Mike nodded, filing away another piece of the puzzle. First the radio static, now sirens. When a cargo plane flew overhead, its engines rumbling. Through the clouds, Emily ducked her head instinctively, as if the sound itself might reveal her location to someone searching. "My daughter used to be scared of thunderstorms," Mike offered, keeping his tone casual. "Would hide under her bed every time. She's got kids of her own now, still calls me when the weather gets bad." Emily didn't take the bait, offering no stories of her own family in return. Instead, she asked, "How much further to the truck stop?" "Just up ahead," Mike replied, signaling for the exit. "Best coffee in 3 counties, if you believe their sign." The Blue Star Diner's parking lot was nearly empty, just a few long-haul trucks and local cars scattered across the wet asphalt. Mike pulled into a space near the entrance, killing the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy after hours of road noise and rain. "I'm starving," Mike said, reaching for his wallet. "Their meatloaf's pretty decent if you're hungry." Emily stared at the diner's brightly lit windows, at the handful of patrons visible inside. Her expression shifted from longing to wariness. "I'll wait here," she said quietly. "Food's better inside," Mike suggested. "And warmer too." Emily shook, her head pulling her hood up despite being inside the truck. "I'm not hungry," she insisted, though her stomach chose that moment to growl audibly. Mike studied her for a moment, the way she shrank into herself, making herself smaller, less noticeable. Whatever she was running from, it had taught her to hide in plain sight. "I'll bring something back for you," he decided, not pushing further. "Any allergies I should know about?" She shook her head, then hesitated. "Thank you," she added, the words sounding rusty, as if gratitude was a language she'd forgotten how to speak. Inside the diner, Mike ordered coffee and 2 meals to go. While waiting, he scrolled through messages on his phone, a text from Carol asking about his ETA, weather alerts for the counties ahead. And then, as he was about to put the phone away, it vibrated with a new message. "Unknown number. Blocked." Mike opened it, expecting spam. Instead, 6 words appeared on his screen, sending a chill down his spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "Keep driving. She's safer with you." Mike's head snapped up, scanning the diner. Just the usual crowd, a couple of fellow truckers, an elderly pair sharing pie, the waitress refilling coffee cups. Nobody paying him any attention. Nobody who could have known about Emily. When he returned to the truck, Emily was exactly where he'd left her, eyes tracking every movement in the parking lot, shoulders tense. She accepted the foam container of food with murmured thanks but didn't open it immediately. "Everything okay?" she asked, noticing his expression. Mike pocketed his phone without mentioning the text. "Just tired," he lied. "Long haul today." As they pulled back onto the highway, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The message replayed in his mind. "Keep driving. She's safer with you," raising more questions than answers. Whoever sent it knew about Emily, knew she was with him, knew she was running from something, and somehow they had his number. In the passenger seat, Emily slowly unwrapped her sandwich, taking small, careful bites, like someone who'd learned that even meals couldn't be taken for granted. Outside, the last of the storm clouds parted, revealing a sky scattered with stars, cold, distant witnesses to the mystery unfolding on the lonely highway below. Hi everyone, welcome to Unfolding Tales. Today, I'm continuing our story. The storm made its unwelcome return just after midnight, dark clouds swallowing the stars and unleashing a fresh assault of wind and rain. Highway signs flashed warnings of flooding ahead, and Mike's shoulders ached from hours of tense driving. He glanced at Emily, who had finally succumbed to exhaustion, her head resting against the window, breath fogging the glass in small, even puffs. "Emily," Mike said softly, reluctant to disturb her first moment of peace since he'd found her on the roadside. "Emily, we need to make a decision." She startled awake, that same alertness returning instantly to her eyes, the look of someone who never truly allowed themselves to rest deeply. "What's wrong?" she asked, scanning their surroundings with practiced efficiency. Highway patrols closing the road ahead. Flooding. Mike gestured toward the illuminated warning sign. "We've got two options. Wait it out at the truck stop 10 miles back, or..." He hesitated, considering the implications of what he was about to offer. "My place is about 5 miles off the next exit. Nothing fancy, just a small house I keep for when I'm passing through this route." Emily studied his face, searching for hidden intentions. The cab fell silent, except for the rhythmic thud of wipers and the drumming of rain on metal. "Why would you do that?" she finally asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "Let a stranger into your home." Mike shrugged, keeping his eyes on the road. "Been driving these roads long enough to know when someone's in real trouble. Besides," he added with a small smile, "Carol would have my hide if she knew I left a kid out in weather like this." The mention of his wife seemed to ease something in Emily's expression. She turned to watch the raindrops race across her window, weighing invisible options. "Just for tonight," she finally said, more to herself than to Mike. The small house appeared, out of the darkness like an apparition. A modest, single-story building set back from a gravel drive, surrounded by oak trees that swayed and creaked in the wind. No neighbors visible through the curtain of rain, just open fields stretching into darkness. Inside, Mike flipped on lights and moved efficiently through the space, turning up the thermostat, pulling fresh linens from a closet. "Bathrooms there," he pointed. "Guest rooms across the hall. Kitchens stocked with basics if you're hungry." Emily stood awkwardly in the entryway, her backpack still clutched to her chest like a shield. The normalcy of the space, the worn couch with crocheted throw blankets, family photos on the walls, a forgotten coffee mug on the side table, seemed to bewilder her more than anything she'd encountered so far. "When was the last time you ate a real meal?" Mike asked, noting how her collarbone protruded beneath her t-shirt. Emily blinked as if the question required complex calculation. "Yesterday, I think." Mike nodded, heading for the kitchen. "Grilled cheese work for you? Nothing fancy, but it's hot." For the first time since he'd picked her up, Emily's guard lowered slightly. "I haven't had one in ages," she admitted, a ghost of a smile touching her lips before vanishing. Later, after showing her to the guest room, Mike settled onto the living room couch with a blanket, too wired to sleep despite his exhaustion. The storm continued its assault outside, tree branches scraping against the windows like skeletal fingers seeking entry. He had nearly drifted off when a sound cut through the darkness, a muffled cry from the guest room. Mike sat up, listening. It came again, followed by rapid, frightened murmuring. Moving quietly down the hallway, he paused outside Emily's door, not wanting to intrude, but concerned enough to check on her. Through the thin wood, her voice reached him, small and terrified. "They found me. They found me. Mike's hand hovered over the doorknob, torn between offering comfort and respecting her privacy. Before he could decide, he heard her moving around the room, drawers opening, the zip of her backpack, the sounds of someone preparing to flee. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away footprints, erasing traces, hiding secrets in its endless descent. But for Mike Bennett, standing in the darkened hallway of his quiet country home, one thing became crystal clear. Whatever, or whoever, Emily was running from, the danger was far from imaginary. Hi everyone, welcome to Unfolding Tales. Today I'm continuing our story. Dawn arrived with merciful clarity, the storm finally exhausted after its night-long fury. Golden light filtered through the kitchen window as Mike stood at the stove, spatula in hand, the sizzle of bacon filling the quiet house with its homey fragrance. He hadn't slept much. After hearing Emily's frightened whispers, he'd returned to the couch and spent hours staring at the ceiling, piecing together the puzzle of his mysterious passenger. The text message, her constant vigilance, the nightmares, something far beyond. Typical teenage troubles was haunting this girl. Emily appeared in the kitchen doorway, startling him from his thoughts. Her hair was damp from a shower, eyes ringed with shadows that spoke of restless sleep. She'd changed into clean clothes from her backpack, but they hung loosely on her frame. "Morning," Mike offered, sliding a plate of eggs and bacon across the counter. "Coffee's fresh if you want some." Emily eyed the food with barely concealed hunger. "Thanks," she murmured, perching on a stool. "For everything." Mike nodded, turning back to the stove. "Storm's cleared. Roads should be open in an hour or so." "I should go," Emily said quickly, though the longing in her eyes as she glanced around the warm kitchen betrayed her reluctance. "I've already caused you enough." The sharp rap of knuckles against the front door cut her off mid-sentence. 3 authoritative knocks that resonated through the small house like gunshots. Emily froze, fork suspended halfway to her mouth, her face draining of color. Her eyes locked with Mike's, wide with undisguised terror. "Stay here," Mike whispered, motioning toward the hallway that led to the back door. Emily didn't need to be told twice. She slipped silently from the stool, vanishing into the shadows of the house without a sound. Mike wiped his hands on a dish towel, heart hammering against his ribs as he approached the front door. Through the peephole, he saw 2 men standing on his porch, both in dark suits despite the early hour, both with the rigid posture that screamed law enforcement or military. Drawing a deep breath, Mike opened the door, keeping his expression neutral despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. "Good morning," the taller man said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Sorry to disturb you so early, Mr. Bennett." Mike's stomach tightened at the use of his name. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" In perfect synchronization, both men reached into their jackets, producing slim wallets that they flipped open to reveal ID cards. Mike caught a glimpse of an eagle emblem and official-looking text, but the badges were returned to pockets before he could read any details. "Special Agents Mercer and Collins," the first man said. "We're conducting an investigation into a missing minor. Female, 17, approximately 5'6", dark blonde hair." The description matched Emily perfectly. "Have you seen anyone fitting that description in the last 24 hours? Mike leaned against the doorframe, adopting a casual stance that belied the tension coiling in his chest. "Can't say that I have. I've been off the road since yesterday afternoon because of the storm." The second agent, Collins, studied Mike's face with unnerving intensity. "Your truck is registered for long-haul deliveries, Mr. Bennett. Were you on Highway 16 yesterday evening?" "I was heading home before the worst of it hit," Mike replied truthfully. "Didn't see much of anyone out there. Storm was pretty bad." Agent Mercer nodded, though his eyes narrowed slightly. He produced a business card, holding it out. "If you do happen to see or hear anything, please contact us immediately." This is a matter of national security." Mike accepted the card, keeping his expression carefully neutral. "National security, huh? She rob a bank or something?" Neither man smiled. "Sir, if you're withholding information—" "I told you what I know," Mike interrupted. "Now, if you don't mind, my breakfast is getting cold." The agents exchanged glances. Mercer nodded curtly and turned to leave, but Collins lingered for a moment, his gaze sweeping across the entryway behind Mike. Finally, he stepped back, raising his wrist to his mouth. Into what looked like an ordinary watch, he murmured words, too low for Mike to hear clearly, something that sounded like nightshade, followed by a series of numbers. As the black sedan pulled away from his house, Mike closed the door, his hand trembling slightly. He stood motionless, listening to the silence, feeling the weight of the decision he'd just made. He'd lied to federal agents, for a girl he barely knew, and somehow, deep in his gut, he knew he'd made the right choice. Hi everyone, welcome to Unfolding Tales. Today I'm continuing our story. The black sedan had disappeared down the gravel road, but its presence lingered like a shadow in the small house. Mike stood at the window, watching dust settle in its wake, the business card clutched in his hand, its edges crumpled from his grip. "They're gone," he called out, his voice echoing through the suddenly too quiet rooms. Emily emerged from the hallway, moving with the careful precision of someone accustomed to making quick escapes. Her face was composed, but her hands betrayed. Her fingers trembling as she gripped the straps of her backpack, knuckles white with tension. "Those weren't regular cops," Mike said, stating the obvious. "And they weren't looking for just any runaway." He turned to face her fully. "Time for the truth, Emily. Who are you running from?" She held his gaze for a long moment, something shifting behind her eyes, calculations, decisions, the weighing of trust against survival. Then her shoulders slumped as if releasing a burden she'd carried too long alone. "Not here," she whispered, glancing toward the windows. "Can we?" She gestured toward the back of the house. In the small laundry room, with no windows, Emily sat on the dryer, her feet dangling above the linoleum floor. The fluorescent light cast harsh shadows across her face, emphasizing the dark circles beneath her eyes, making her look both younger and older than her 17 years. "My name isn't just Emily," she began, voice low. "It's Emily Winters. My father was Dr. Daniel Winters." The name struck a distant chord in Mike's memory, a news article perhaps, or a segment on the radio. "That name sounds familiar." "It might," Emily nodded. "He was a defense contractor, specialized in quantum computing and artificial intelligence. 3 months ago, he died in what the news called an unfortunate laboratory accident." The bitterness in her voice made it clear she believed nothing of the sort. "The night before he died, he came to my room at 3 in the morning. I'd never seen him so scared." Emily's voice wavered. "He gave me this." From the deepest pocket of her backpack, she produced a small metal case, no larger than a deck of cards. It opened with a click to reveal a sleek, black flash drive, unmarked except for a series of numbers etched into its surface. He said, if anything happened to him, I needed to keep it safe, that people would come looking for it, and I couldn't trust anyone, not the police, not his colleagues, not even family friends. Her fingers closed protectively around the drive. The next morning, they told me he was dead. An explosion in his private lab. Mike sank onto a stack of laundry baskets, trying to process the implications. "What's on it?" "I don't know exactly," Emily admitted. "Dad was working on something big. He called it Project Oracle. He said it could change everything about how we understand intelligence, prediction, even time itself." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The night he died, he told me it had shown him something that scared him. Something he needed to warn people about." The overhead light flickered, as if responding to her words. Mike glanced up, then back at Emily's face, so young to carry such a burden. 2 days after the funeral, men came to our house. They took his computers, his papers, everything. Emily's composure cracked slightly. When they couldn't find what they were looking for, they started following me, watching the house. My mom didn't believe me. She thought I was traumatized, imagining things. But you weren't, Mike said softly. Emily shook her head. Last week I overheard them talking about taking me in for questioning. That's when I ran. She looked up. At Mike, years of fear distilled in her gaze. Dad said if things went wrong, there was someone who could help decrypt the drive. A former colleague in Denver who would know what to do with the information. The pieces clicked into place. Her destination, her secrecy, her terror. Not just a runaway, but a messenger carrying something powerful enough to make dangerous men. And a teenage girl across state lines. Something worth killing for. Outside, the morning sun illuminated a world washed clean by the storm, deceptively peaceful. But in the windowless laundry room, reality had shifted, revealing darker currents flowing beneath the surface of ordinary life. They'll be back, Mike said, certainty settling heavy in his chest. And next time, they won't be asking politely. Hi everyone, welcome to Unfolding Tales. Today I'm continuing our story. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Mike's property as he loaded the last of their supplies into his pickup truck. They had decided against taking his 18-wheeler, too conspicuous, too easily tracked. The old Ford had seen better days, but it was registered in Carol's maiden name and had no GPS system to betray their location. Emily stood on the porch, her backpack clutched close, eyes scanning the horizon with the vigilance that had become second nature. The flash drive was hidden in a hollowed-out battery among actual batteries in a flashlight, her father's idea, she'd explained. Simple but effective. Mike tossed a duffel bag into the truck bed when he first noticed it. A distant rumble that didn't belong to the clear blue sky. A sound that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "You hear that?" he called to Emily, shading his eyes against the sun, searching the empty expanse above. She froze, head tilted, listening. The rumble intensified, transforming into a distinctive roar that anyone who'd lived through military exercises would recognize. The sound of a jet engine, powerful and purposeful, drawing closer with alarming speed. It appeared from behind the tree line, sleek and predatory, military gray against the cloudless blue. An F-16 fighter jet, flying lower than any civilian aircraft would dare, its path forming a deliberate circle around the area. Around Mike's property. "Get inside," Mike ordered, abandoning the supplies and rushing toward the porch. "Now!" Emily didn't need to be told twice. She bolted through the front door, Mike close behind. Through the window they watched as the jet completed another circuit, close enough that the windows rattled with each pass. "This isn't normal," Mike muttered, pulling curtains closed. "Military doesn't run exercises this low over residential areas. Not without warning." Emily sank onto the couch, face pale as paper. "They're creating a perimeter," she whispered. "It's what Dad said they would do when they—" Her voice trailed off, the implication hanging heavy in the air. Before Mike could respond, a new sound joined the jet's roar, the distinctive thwap, thwap, thwap of helicopter blades cutting through air. Not one but several, approaching from different directions. "They're boxing us in," Mike realized aloud, moving to the kitchen window for a better view. 3 black helicopters had appeared, hovering at strategic points around his property. No markings, no identification, just ominous presence against the afternoon sky. He turned to Emily, something hardening in his chest. This was no longer about giving a ride to a scared kid. Whatever she carried had brought military-grade response to his doorstep, endangering not just them, but potentially his entire family if they connected him to this. "What's really on that drive, Emily?" he demanded, voice low and urgent. "No more half-truths. What could possibly warrant fighter jets and tactical teams?" Emily's hands trembled as she reached for the flashlight in her backpack, unscrewing the EE bottom to retrieve the small flash drive. She held it in her palm, this tiny object that had transformed her life into a nightmare of pursuit and fear. Project Oracle isn't just predictive AI, she said, words tumbling out rapidly now. It's a domestic surveillance program. Dad discovered they were using his algorithms to monitor American citizens, not terrorists, not foreign threats, but ordinary people. Journalists, activists, even judges and politicians who opposed certain policies. Mike's blood ran cold. That's illegal. They can't. They're doing it anyway. Emily cut in, her voice stronger now, despite the fear in her eyes. The drive contains proof, dates, names, operations, evidence of a program they're not supposed to be running on U.S. soil. She swallowed hard, glancing toward the window where the helicopter blades continued their ominous rhythm. Dad found something else too, something that scared him even more than the surveillance. The room fell silent, except for the roar of engines. Outside, a technological storm gathering around the small house. Mike moved to the window, carefully peering through a crack in the curtains. Men in tactical gear were now visible at the tree line, moving with military precision toward the house. "Whatever your father found," Mike said grimly, "they're willing to send an army to keep it buried." He turned back to Emily. Decision made. "And we've got about 5 minutes to figure out how to get past them." Hi everyone, welcome to Unfolding Tales. Today I'm continuing our story. Time seemed to compress as Mike moved through his house with surprising calm, decades of split-second highway decisions having prepared him for moments when hesitation meant disaster. He pulled back the worn rug in his pantry, revealing a trapdoor installed during the Cold War by the home's previous owner, a paranoid but ultimately prescient farmer. "Storm shelter," Mike explained, yanking the heavy door open. "Goes about 15 feet down, has air vents that come up behind the shed. They won't find it unless they tear up the whole house." Emily balked at the dark opening. "I can't leave. You to face them alone." Mike's weathered face softened for a moment. "Listen to me. That drive is important. Important enough for your father to die for. Important enough for you to run. If they're bringing this much firepower, they're not here to ask questions." He pressed his old flip phone into her palm. "It's not smart. Can't be tracked easily. If I'm not back in an hour, call my daughter. Number's saved under Carol Jr. Tell her code breakdown. She'll know what to do." The thudding of helicopter blades grew more insistent as Emily descended into the darkness. Mike closed the trapdoor, replaced the rug, and pushed a heavy shelf in front of it for good measure. Then he walked deliberately to his gun cabinet, unlocking it to retrieve his grandfather's shotgun. He wasn't planning to use it, that would be suicide against tactical teams, but he needed to establish the image of a confused, defensive homeowner, not a co-conspirator. Mike had barely made it to his front porch, shotgun pointed safely skyward, when 3 black SUVs pulled up his driveway, dust billowing in their wake. Men in tactical gear poured out, weapons raised, forming a semicircle around his home. "Lower your weapon, Mr. Bennett," called a familiar voice. Agent Mercer stepped forward, his casual demeanor from this morning replaced by cold authority. "This property is now under federal jurisdiction. We need to conduct a search immediately." Mike kept his expression neutral, channeling the indignant confusion of an innocent citizen. "Not without a warrant, you don't." "What the hell is going on here?" Mercer approached, hand extended for the shotgun. "National security exception, sir. The warrant's being processed, but we have reason to believe you're harboring a fugitive in possession of classified materials." Mike reluctantly surrendered his weapon, but stood his ground on the porch steps. "I live alone. Check for yourself." "Oh, we intend to," the second agent, Collins, replied, already signaling teams toward the house. "Every inch of this property will be searched, including that truck you were loading." As agents swarmed into his home, Mike maintained his position on the porch, watching Mercer closely. "You mind telling me what this is really about? Since when? Does the government send fighter jets after teenage girls?" A flicker of surprise crossed Mercer's face before his professional mask returned. So you admit she was here? I admit nothing, Mike shot back. But I know excessive force when I see it. Collins approached, voice low as he addressed Mercer, apparently forgetting Mike's proximity. Sir, preliminary sweep is negative. Moving to secondary locations now. Mercer's jaw tightened. She has to be here. The Oracle tracking was specific. Oracle? Mike interjected, seizing on the slip. That what this is about? The look that passed between the agents confirmed Emily's story more than words ever could. Collins moved closer to Mike, voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Listen carefully, Mr. Bennett. You're stepping into something you don't understand. If that drive goes public, the whole thing crumbles. Not just careers, not just departments, everything. As tactical teams continued their search, Mike was escorted to one of the SUVs for his safety. Left alone with an agent who seemed more interested in the search than his prisoner, Mike carefully reached for the old flip phone he'd kept in his back pocket. Emily had his main one. With practiced movements from years of texting while driving, he typed a message to a contact listed simply as Frank, a former investigative journalist who'd once ridden shotgun with Mike for a feature story on America's truckers. A man who'd given Mike his card with the words, "If you ever see something on the road that doesn't add up, I'm your first call." The message was simple. Oracle defense contractor Daniel Winters, Black Ops at my place now, surveillance program on US soil, evidence exists. As he pressed send, Mike watched the helicopters circling his property like mechanical vultures. Whatever happened next, the secret was out. The line had been drawn, and Mike Bennett, career trucker and unexpected guardian, had just taken his stand on the side of truth. Hi everyone, welcome to Unfolding Tales. Today I'm continuing our story. The darkness of the storm shelter enveloped Emily, broken only by the weak beam of her flashlight. The space was cramped but clean, concrete walls lined with metal shelving. Holding canned goods, bottled water, and emergency supplies, Mike Bennett had prepared for disasters, though likely not the kind currently surrounding his home. Above her, the muffled sounds of boots on floorboards echoed through the ceiling. Men's voices barked orders, furniture scraped across floors, cabinets slammed open and closed. They were tearing the place apart, methodically destroying Mike's home in their search for her, for the small flash drive clutched in her trembling hand. Emily glanced at the old flip phone Mike had given her, checking the time. 43 minutes. Since he'd closed the trapdoor, her heart pounded painfully against her ribs. What were they doing to him up there? The question gnawed at her conscience, a relentless reminder that another person was suffering because of her. Her father's voice seemed to whisper from memory. Sometimes one person's sacrifice can save thousands. And the phone suddenly vibrated in her palm, making her jump. A text message appeared on the small screen. "Emily, this is Frank Donovan, investigative journalist." Mike reached out. "I'm setting up a secure upload server. The world needs to see what's on that drive. Instructions follow." Emily's breath caught in her throat. This was it, the moment her father had prepared her for. With shaking fingers, she retrieved a small laptop from her backpack, one her father had specially modified with multiple security features. The battery was nearly depleted after days on the run, but it would only need to stay powered for a few more minutes. Following Frank's detailed instructions, Emily established an encrypted connection to the server he'd prepared. Her father had taught her enough about cybersecurity to recognize the sophistication of the setup, multiple routing protocols, distributed storage across various servers, instant mirroring to prevent deletion. The flash drive fit into the laptop's port with a soft click. The screen illuminated her face with pale blue light as she navigated through folders with cryptic names. Oracle Prime, Citizen Metrics, Operation Sentinel. Inside were thousands of documents, videos, and data files, meticulously organized and annotated in her father's precise style. She started the upload, watching as the progress bar inched forward with excruciating slowness. 3%, 5%, 7%, a particularly loud crash from above made her flinch. Were they getting closer to the shelter? The progress bar seemed frozen at 12%. Come on, she whispered, willing the ancient rural internet connection to work faster. At 18%, the first message from Frank appeared, starting to receive files. First documents confirm illegal domestic surveillance. At 34%, another message. My God, these biotest reports. They've been experimenting on civilians without consent. Military contractors testing biological enhancement compounds in public water supplies. At 57%, the noise above suddenly intensified, shouting, radio chatter, the sound of men rushing toward exits. At 73%, Frank's message was jubilant. It's happening. Major outlets picking up the story. Breaking news banners. Your father's name is already trending. Emily held her breath as the upload crawled toward completion. 89%, 94%, 98%, 100%. Upload complete flashed across the screen. Perhaps the most beautiful words she'd ever seen. The sounds from above had changed. The helicopter's rhythmic beating was growing distant. The heavy footsteps had disappeared, replaced by the squeal of tires on gravel as vehicles departed in apparent haste. Emily waited, counting minutes in her head, straining to hear any sign of danger remaining. When the silence had stretched for 15 full minutes, she carefully pushed against the trapdoor. It resisted. The shelf Mike had moved was still in place. "Mike!" she called out, voice raw with emotion. "Mike, are you there?" The weight above shifted, light suddenly flooding the darkness as the trapdoor lifted. Mike's face appeared, battered and sporting a fresh cut above his eye, but very much alive. His expression was one of stunned disbelief. "They're gone," he said, reaching down to help her up. "All of them, just packed up and left like someone hit an evacuation alarm." In Mike's living room, the television was on, volume low. Every major news network displayed the same breaking story. Classified documents revealing illegal government operations, unauthorized testing on American citizens, a massive surveillance apparatus operating outside constitutional boundaries. And there, in the corner of the screen, a photo of her father, Dr. Daniel Winters, labeled not as a conspiracy theorist or traitor, but as a whistleblower who had given his life to expose the truth. "He did it," Emily whispered, tears finally breaking free. "We did it. Hi everyone, welcome to Unfolding Tales. Today I'm concluding our story." The morning sun streamed through the windows of Mike's small living room, catching dust motes that danced in the golden light. 3 days had passed since the upload. 3 days of non-stop news coverage, congressional statements, and public outrage. 3 days of quiet recovery in the aftermath of the storm that had changed both their lives forever. Emily sat cross-legged on the couch, a mug of tea cooling in her hands as she watched the television with an expression that mingled relief and disbelief. Mike occupied his worn recliner, the newspaper spread across his lap, though his eyes rarely left the screen where his own name occasionally flashed alongside hers. "Senator calls for full investigation into Project Oracle and unauthorized domestic surveillance program," the news anchor announced, her expression appropriately grave. The whistleblower documents provided by the late Dr. Daniel Winters reveal at least 17 instances of illegal biological testing in communities across 5 states. Mike glanced at Emily, noting how she straightened slightly whenever her father's name was mentioned. The shadows beneath her eyes had begun to fade, her posture gradually losing the hunched defensiveness of someone perpetually bracing for impact. "How's your mom doing with all this?" Mike asked during a commercial break. Emily's smile was small but genuine. Still in shock, I think, but relieved. She set her mug down on the coffee table. The Justice Department's putting us both under protection until the hearings are complete. With oversight this time, multiple agencies, civilian committee supervision. Smart, Mike nodded. Don't put all your trust in one group. They fell silent as the news returned, showing footage of protesters gathered outside government buildings, demanding accountability. The world had shifted in ways that would take months, perhaps years, to fully resolve. Project Oracle had been officially shut down, its architects facing criminal charges, its victims promised compensation. I'm heading back on the road tomorrow, Mike said quietly, folding the newspaper. Carolina's shipment's already 3 days late. Emily nodded, something like sadness crossing her features. I figured you would be. She hesitated, then reached for her backpack, ever present even now. I wanted to give you something before I go. From inside a tattered notebook, she withdrew a carefully folded piece of paper. When she handed it to Mike, he found himself looking at a hand-drawn map, meticulously detailed with landmarks, coordinates, and notations in neat handwriting. My dad had safe places, Emily explained. People he trusted, locations off the grid, places where signals can't reach, where records don't exist. Her eyes met his, earnest and intense. In case you ever need to disappear. Mike studied the map, recognizing some remote areas where he'd driven through on long hauls, places where highways gave way to unmarked roads, where civilization thinned to wilderness. He carefully folded it and tucked it into his shirt pocket. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, he said with a gentle smile. But thank you. The doorbell rang, breaking the moment. Through the window, they could see the black SUV waiting in. The driveway, different from those that had surrounded his home days earlier. These bore official Justice Department seals, their mission now protection rather than pursuit. Emily shouldered her backpack, looking suddenly young again, a teenager, heading off to school rather than a girl who had helped expose a government conspiracy. She paused at the door, turning back to the weathered trucker who had changed everything by making one simple choice on a stormy night. You know, they're calling you a hero on the internet, she said with a hint of mischief in her voice. The ordinary man who stood between a frightened girl and those trying to bury the truth. Mike shook his head, uncomfortable with the label. Just did what anyone would do. No, Emily replied softly. You didn't. That's the whole point. As the SUV pulled away, carrying Emily toward congressional testimonies and a future bright with possibility, Mike returned to his empty house. Tomorrow, he would be back on the highway, watching miles of asphalt disappear beneath his wheels, delivering goods across a country that would never be quite the same again. In his pocket, the map crinkled softly, a reminder that in a world of surveillance and secrets, the most powerful force remained the simplest, one person choosing to do the right thing when it mattered most.